Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today I've got a very exciting control deck in store for you. It's a white, blue and black, or Esper colors, built around Mindsplice Apparatus, a card that has been in standard for a while, but I think has gotten a lot better with recent expansions. This 4-mana artifact has flash, so we can play it at instant speed, since we're mostly trying to play our spells during the opponent's turn, and then at the beginning of our upkeep, the apparatus picks up an oil counter, and all our instants and sorceries get a 1-mana discount for each oil counter on the apparatus, so this plays exceptionally well with the spree cards from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, especially 3 Steps Ahead, which is often used as a 3-mana counterspell, but we can also pay additional mana to choose multiple modes, including pay 3 additional mana to create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature we control, perfect for copying the Mindsplice Apparatus, so we get multiples going, so we get a bigger and bigger discount, and then we can also draw 2 and then discard a card with it, so a very flexible card that's good at pretty much any stage of the game. And then we've got one more card with a spree mechanic, Final Showdown, which can be an instant speed board wipe. We're probably not going to use the other modes too often. And then the reason we have a one-off Final Showdown and so many one-offs throughout the deck is because we're also playing with Mystical Teachings from Foundations, a very nice reprint, 4 mana to search our library for an instant card or a card with flash and put it into our hand. So Teachings can find the apparatus if we don't have one in the first place, and then later we can also flash back Mystical Teachings for 5 and a black. So as you'll see here, we've got a lot of generic mana cost with casting the Teachings and flashing it back, so it's tailor-made to be played alongside our Mindsplice Apparatus, as we can then later maybe cast it for a single blue and flash it back for a single black out of the graveyard to find whatever instant we need. And then our eventual win conditions, if our opponent sticks around, include a lot of X spells, which of course also scale very nicely with Mindsplice Apparatus. We've got 2 copies of White Sun's Twilight, which can eventually wipe the board in addition to gaining X life, and we also get to make X 1/1 Might tokens, so those can poison the opponent to death in a single attack if X equals 10 or more. And we also have a one-off Outrageous Robbery, which is another instant we can find with the Teachings to exile the top X cards of the opponent's library that we eventually get to cast as well, so we can win using the opponent's deck, or we can just mill them out if X equals enough. And we also have 2 copies of Silver Scrutiny. This one we can only play at instant speed if X equals 3 or less, so we're mostly going to play it in our own turn if we can cast it for X equals 6 or 7, and then refuel, and then still have mana up for other spells. And we also have a one-off Time Stop, another nice reprint out of Foundations, and it's a 6-mana instant that ends the turn. So the Oracle text is very simple. The implications are maybe a bit more complicated, because by ending the turn, we exile all the cards that are currently on the stack, including Time Stop itself, so we can't recur it out of the graveyard, but we can also use it as essentially a counter spell that will exile the opponent's spells that are on the stack, and of course we can also use it in the middle of combat to prevent damage from being dealt, and we can also use it in combination with a lethal White Sun's Twilight, make an army of might tokens, pass the turn, and then at some point time stop, so we get to immediately go back to our turn where we get to attack for lethal, so that can also beat opposing sweepers, for instance. And then rounding out the deck, we do need a couple board wipes to keep up against aggro, since our game plan does involve casting lots of expensive spells, so we need the full set of Temporary Lockdown to survive long enough. No synergy with the apparatus, but at least we're not playing many permanents with mana value 2 or less that will get exiled by it. And then Union of the Third Path, especially good in combination with a large Silver Scrutiny, as we can first draw a ton of cards, and then while we have a lot of cards in hand, we can also gain a lot of life with the Union, can also save us against the various burn decks. And then we've got some cheap spot removal, Anoint with Affliction can exile stuff, and then Get Lost can also hit enchantments, so it's quite versatile. And then the map tokens we can also maybe exile with a Temporary Lockdown. We've got a one-off Think Twice, just because it's a fun card to have, also plays well with Apparatus, as we can maybe cast and flash back for double blue to draw 2. And then Experimental Augury is also quite important here, as a 2-mana cantrip that can look at the top 3, put 1 card in hand, so we can find whatever we're missing in certain matchups, whether it's removal or counter spells or finishers, but it can also proliferate, which is awesome with oil counters on Apparatus, as we'll get a bigger discount going forward, so that can also be quite powerful. And then the mana base is mostly the various Surveil lands and the Verge lands, which play well with each other, so they can produce both colors. And then a couple copies of Fabled Passage to get our various basics, so we also have access to a little bit of black mana, since at the end of the day we're just splashing a bit of black for Anoint and Teachings, and then eventually we'll need double black for Robbery, but that's a finisher, so we don't really expect to cast it early. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Can anoint on 2, and then double 3 steps ahead to slow the opponent down. Opponent's blue-green. So maybe a crab slash terror deck. But it's maybe a little soon to tell. And then we want to hit more land drops and find Apparatus. Up the Beanstalk is a good one, cannot counter it right now. And that is a type of card that can eventually take over. Another 3 steps ahead or land, I think I take the land. Now if we do find a lockdown we can clean up the Beanstalk, but for now it's in play. And it triggers on cast, so even if I counter their expensive spell, they'll still get to draw. And they've got another one, probably need to say no. Since we don't have a lockdown nor a second white source, so we're pretty far from answering those. Alright, we'll pass. Can also scrutiny for 2 at instant speed, just to hit our land drops. And found Apparatus, okay. That's promising. Although our opponent might be playing with this town ain't big enough to bounce it back as well. Get Lost could answer the Beanstalk before they get value from it, as we already see a Tolarian Terror. 3 instants and sorceries in graveyard. But I think we prioritize the Apparatus here. And then hope to find a lockdown. Our opponent maybe has an Edimurk Crab in hand, which they're planning to play end of turn. Or they're just gonna, this town ain't big enough, bounce Talents and Apparatus while drawing with the Beanstalk. At least they're using it now while it doesn't have any counters on it. Into the Floodmaw instead. And a Crab as well. Alright, so we are falling behind. They're not playing any counter spells, so there's no real point in main-facing Apparatus. So I'll just play Archive, keep Fabled Passage. But yeah, we might get tempoed out if they have some more bounce spells in hand. Definitely chump with the fish while we can. We're not getting more than 5 life out of it. Opponent might be afraid of sweepers, so they're trying not to overextend. Could see them level up the talent, in which case I could get lost it. Otherwise they get back into the Floodmaw, which in turn bounces my Apparatus again. So then we're not really making any progress. Still feels kind of bad, but what's the alternative? Just cast Scrutiny for 3 and look for White Suns or a lockdown, but then they'll still have the Floodmaw in hand. Yeah, I'll just get lost here. Opponent's gonna bounce their own thing again. Alright, at least we got rid of a bounce spell and they won't get a Floodmaw back. I don't think I need to counter this. So we essentially answered 2 bounce spells with that one Get Lost. Take my turn. Another Beanstalk, so opponent's gonna see a lot of cards. But their end game is still attacking with a bunch of 5/5s, which is a plan we could eventually beat if we get the ball rolling on Apparatus. But that's still a big if. Take 3. Could also anoint their altar at some point. And then I think I'm okay fetching. We put some counter spells on the bottom, which are fine draws. A replay apparatus. Making copies of apparatus with 3 steps ahead is also going to be trickier when they have bounce spells available. And mystical teachings. Alright, so we're starting to get somewhere. Opponent will be able to play crab, end of turn, and then what's our play from there? Might want to get our instant speed board wipe as well at some points with teachings. For now I'll pass. Also, if our opponent draws too much, we could always end up decking them with a robbery. That's another angle of attack. Opponent did not play anything that turn, that's surprising. Seed of Hope to mill some more. So yeah, I'm probably fine anointing a token here, since we won't be able to answer their other creatures. Opponent tries to level up the talent again. So once again, I could teachings for a Get Lost to remove it. I think that's reasonable. Just double checking my options. And then now we can counter a town in big enough so they don't reset my apparatus. All their opponent still gets to draw 2. So yeah, it's about time we find a lockdown too. Can maybe wait for them to explore and then anoint the token they explore with. And then we likely still see a terror. So at least we've fought through triple this town ain't big enough into the Floodmaw. So there's only going to be so many of those left. Now I probably need to scrutiny for at least x equals 5, so I can still maybe cast a lockdown afterwards. So let's do that. Did not find the lockdown, but did find a White Suns and another teachings, so that's alright. So we can try and set up the 1-2 punch of Twilight with time stop, but apparatus probably needs a few more counters for that to work. So we fall to 7. Another terror. And then I'll start with Think Twice. See what we draw might affect our decision on teachings. Union is gonna buy us more time. Still gonna teachings here. And then our opponent's gonna play Crab. So they have 26 cards remaining, pretty far from decking them with a robbery. And then I might want to get another counter spell here. So I pretty much need to White Suns, because Union doesn't keep me alive. So then what's the plan? White Suns I can cast for at least 5. And then still have time stop up. What are we trying to counter? An opposing counter spell maybe if they're running it. And I can always copy my apparatus as well. But they might bounce it end of turn, they don't. Alright. So I can fire off a couple unions first, just to gain more life. Should still be able to White Suns for enough. And then White Suns for 5. We'll still leave time stop available. And we can 3 steps ahead if needed. Opponent's gonna unsummon the crab, that's fine. This is unlikely to be a lethal White Suns, but we're just trying to buy ourselves more time. Opponent unsummons again. So they get to redeploy their creatures. 2 mana crab. I might want to 3 steps ahead now before they draw. Counter, and then I should also be able to make a token of the Mindsplice. Before they draw into more ways to answer it, hopefully. Alright, opponent has another crab, that's fine, but now they won't be able to draw into a bounce spell and bounce apparatus in response, which is what I wanted to avoid. So now our opponent's down to 24 cards, 22, 21 with their draw step. So yeah, the robbery is likely going to be our win condition. So never found our lockdown to answer the beanstalks, but now we're just going to turn those into our win condition. We're back to 26, now 21, so we padded our life total nicely. Opponent seems to be out of basics with the bushwhack. They're going to start fighting our tokens because they're scared. That's fine by me. Also haven't drawn into any of our proliferate effects yet, which can certainly speed up Mindsplice getting counters to then set up our lethal robbery. And then time stop also basically buys us an extra turn to set up. So we might actually end up using teachings to get our proliferate cards, although they probably draw into another bounce spell for apparatus in the meantime. Opponent's looking at the graveyard, maybe another Storm Chaser's Talents, because their opponent's definitely going for it. They feel like they're not necessarily going to win the late game anymore. Alright, so we get to untap, get some more counters. And there's Augury, perfect. So, can maybe start there. Find another Augury. Final Showdown, I guess, is also pretty backbreaking here. Alright, fine. Although we can always teachings for whatever we want. So, there's no bad way to do this, really. Yeah, I guess we'll just pass with Showdown and Time Stop available. But might flash in another creature here to try and go for lethal. Another crab. So how much can I robbery for? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So technically if they have nothing, this would mill them. But I'll respect the counterspell. Opponent goes to attackers. Destroy all creatures, please. Can always teachings for another counterspell in response. And that works. And our opponent scoops it up, alright, don't even need to show them the robbery. But yeah, next turn we should be able to cast it and essentially mill them out. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a decent hand. Got all our colors. Good mix of basic types and verge lanes to fix our colors. And another 3 steps ahead. It is tempting. We're on the play. Yeah, I think I can keep it. Even though I do want a 4th lane for apparatus as well. Opponent mono white and a carrot cake. Yeah, this is a very winnable matchup, I think. A mono white control deck. Doesn't have many answers to artifacts. And then we can eventually take over with our powerful late game. We're not going to be under too much pressure initially. And we can even counter their Caretaker's Talents and other card draw engines. Anoint also good answer to the Enduring Innocence. And taking 1 damage per turn is manageable. So I don't think I'll be removing any tokens anytime soon. We have a lockdown to clean those up eventually. So yeah, mostly hoping that Apparatus can stick around. Opponent seems to have missed a land drop. So they probably have some powerful 3s in hand they kept on top. They could have also sacked in upkeep to maybe find a 3rd land, so they were really hoping to draw 1 naturally, so they could play their talent. I'm hoping they don't go for it, so I get to resolve Apparatus instead of having to counter. Enduring Innocence, perfect. That one we can anoint. So we don't have to fight over it now. But I don't mind main phasing this in case they would destroy their own Enduring Innocence. And then now we're in control mode with 2 counter spells that can also draw. Scrutiny to eventually take over. So we'll see if our opponent has anything to interact. Ooh, Exercise. Don't usually see that one, but would have been very effective if we didn't have an answer. And a land can go. Union's good to cast before we play a land. Although now we're looking to 3 steps ahead, make a copy of Apparatus as well. Get Lost can answer Caretaker's Talent, for instance. Opponent got another Exercise, wow. So can we counter and make a copy? We should be able to. So instead of removing our Apparatus, now we have 2. Gonna wait 1 more turn on Scrutiny. Okay, maybe put a 3rd Apparatus into play. Another Carrot Cake is fine. The token also has mana value 4, so we're not exiling it with our own lockdown. Good to point out. And our opponents cannot be happy with how this game is progressing. Okay, so probably time to refuel with Silver Scrutiny. Can cast one for X equals 7, only tapping 2 lands. Find our White Suns. A Robbery, we'll need an extra black source first. But I'll Union to gain a ton of life, so we don't need to worry about that for a while. And Lockdown can also eventually clean up. I'll play an untapped land. And then Augury to proliferate here is also pretty awesome. Can let go of a land. And maybe another Apparatus at this point. Farewell is no longer in the format, so we don't have to worry about the opponent exiling all our artifacts here. Demolition Field could blow up our black source, but we do have 1 swamp. A Rest in Peace, I don't think we care about. It would just stop our flashback, basically. So I can maybe Augury. If I find Mystical Teachings, I can cast and flashback in response. Alright. So I want to tap our blue here. And then Time Stop is probably one of the cards we want. And then flashback. A little risky here since we will be tapped out, so we can't counter their next play. But what about another 3 steps ahead? Rest in peace resolves. And there's a talent, which I can get lost. Although at this point, we should have things under control with Twilight into Time Stop. Okay. So, cast it for X equals... I mean, can do it for 13, only tapping double white. And then we have 2 counter spells and a time stop available. So if our opponent casts their sweeper here, we just time stop in response. Which ends the turn, Day of Judgment gets exiled. And our opponent explodes. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a somewhat clunky hand, although if we can surveil into a second land, then maybe we're okay. Augury can find one more land if needed. We're gaining a lot of life. Still not great. Yeah, I think we can do better. This is a little bit better. May not be able to keep both 3 steps ahead since we only have the 1 blue source at the moment. And a plains is not ideal. Does make it so we can maybe curve out a little bit better. But I'll look for blue mana. Opponent makes his discard once again. So it's likely an Esper Pixie deck. I think Union can go. And then could fetch for a blue source right now. Yeah, in this matchup we just want to basically keep hitting our land drops. Find lockdown to clean things up. Could also just be a blue-black version. Alright, Fear picks up the Nightmare. Yeah, the discard is particularly annoying early. And then Island I could keep at this point. So I can also consider discarding a land, but I think, again, hitting land drops is the key early on. Opponent goes to attackers. Yeah, we could anoint the Fear here. Stem the bleeding a little bit. Would have been bad if they had a Kaito to ninjutsu. And then opponent didn't even play the Nightmare, so they're keeping up mana. We'll just play Island and pass for now. Opponent had an Entity Tracker. Makes sense. Probably need to counter that, otherwise they get to draw a bunch off of it. Now a Nightmare, discard Augury. And there's a lockdown, so don't need it right now. But that's a way to clean up a lot of the opponent's stuff. Although also have to watch out for bounce spells bouncing the lockdown, because that could make things worse. So, do we fetch? I guess we do. Get another island. And then we can surveil. Anoint doesn't seem needed. At this point I want Apparatus. Mystical Teachings would be good, since we can also flash it back. Any of our card draw effects, basically. Well, our opponent might have a bunch of removal in hand. That's not doing much for them at the moment. And we've got lockdowns for days. Alright, Union, I could main phase Cycle. I'll just wait. Alright, opponent's gonna bounce their own Nightmare, just so they can redeploy it. That's fine. And that's why they didn't want to sacrifice it earlier. So we can Union. And I think we ditch a lockdown. as we keep drawing more. Yeah, because if they bounce Lockdown with Nightmare underneath, I would have to discard again. So that's something we want to avoid. I guess our opponent was maybe missing white mana after all, so that's now unlocked. And once again, just bouncing the Nightmare. Could have been worse. And there's Apparatus. Alright, so now with Apparatus, might even main phase it, although they could have more this town in big enough to bounce it. But yeah, with Apparatus taking up, we can potentially take over. Although Pixie bounces Nightmare once again, so they've gotten a lot of use out of it. And at this point, I probably say goodbye to the Lockdown, even though it was kind of our key card. Yeah, I have to be careful. Let's see. I can play Apparatus twice in case they were to bounce it with another this town in big enough. Just wanted to make sure we don't end up in a spot where they bounce it and then I can't replay it and they make me discard it again. Alright, can probably cycle this right now. And a showdown could sweep things up. Pixie pick up Nightmare, and then when they go to play it, I can wipe the board. Scavenger first, perfect. Yeah, they weren't expecting the instant speed sweeper. And there's probably no point in choosing more modes here. We're still at 12, so I have to be a little bit mindful of our life total. But a Silver Scrutiny was excellent, so cast it for probably the max amount, which would be X equals 8. Can hit line drop for a turn. And then we don't have to discard to hand size. Alright, could also keep up Augury, but I might want to play another Apparatus first. And now we want to look for our finishers. Another Augury seems okay though. And there's another Scavenger. 3 cards left. Double Scavenger. They just have to go for it. And a Fear of Isolation, redeploy Nightmare, so they are getting some counters. And of course we did already lose most of our lockdowns. So this could actually be a problem for us, if we don't find our Twilight soon. Discard a land. So I don't really have time to mess around with another Apparatus first. I'll just Augury. There's a Twilight, perfect. Could also consider casting another Augury to maybe look for a counter. As long as Twilight is for 5, that's good enough. And if we can do this with counterspell backup, that would be even safer. I'll take a Get Lost. Okay, I'll just do it for the full amount now, which would be, let's see, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Sure. That works, and now we're presenting plenty of lethal attackers, and our opponent scoops it up. Awesome! On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. We don't actually have any islands or plains to enable the verges, so we have double white, single blue, but we'll make it work. Facing aggro, presumably. Can get lost if needed. red-green, and a challenger. Yeah, that's probably worth taking out already. The map tokens are also good to enable Valiant on future challengers. Alright, and then now Backstreet will enable 3 steps ahead. Final Showdown is probably not necessary when we have White Suns. So I don't know if we'll have time to set up an apparatus here. We might be under too much pressure. But at least no creature this turn. And then we'll keep up 4 mana for Teachings. Screaming Nemesis is probably worth countering now. And then I should probably pass with a 5 mana, 3 steps ahead up. If we keep a card on top with a Surveil and end up shuffling, that's also not super useful. So opponent passes, not even leveling up the talent. So I'm kind of wondering what they have in hand. But all Teachings for Apparatus now, I think. Alright, so we'll play a land. And I'll keep a Fabled Passage. Can always discard Apparatus to a 3 steps ahead if we don't need both. Now our opponent levels up. Alright, so we're pretty much in the ideal position now. Apparatus in play, and some powerful spells we can cast on the cheap. Another Screaming Nemesis. So, time for a fully powered up 3 steps ahead. If I fetch, I can cast it. Possible our opponent was sandbagging to set up 2 powerful plays in the same turn, which is definitely a possibility, but we get to copy Apparatus. And a land can go. Alright, so we're getting close to a 1 mana flashed back Teachings. For now we'll pass. Hired Claw is fine. Opponent goes exploring. We're just gonna play another Apparatus here. And then we can Teachings for 1 mana. Which might go for Time Stop, which I can combine with Twilight to set up the 1-hit KO, basically. I guess there's no harm in playing the Teachings now. And then Time Stop looks good. But we have some options here. Could also go for Robbery and try and play the opponent's deck. Or get another counterspell. But Time Stop is kind of like a counterspell. So this is kind of our wombo combo. Cast a lethal White Suns with Time Stop backup. So X equals 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Which leaves up double blue. And our opponent scoops it up. Yeah, I can wait for them to put a spell on the stack. If they try and remove a token, we can maybe Time Stop to end the turn and save it. But yeah, either way, we'll eventually get there. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We're missing black mana for Annoyance, but we have Apparatus, couple Surveil lands. So we'll try it. Opponent blue-black for starters. Milling a green land as well. So it could be a Sultai graveyard deck. So I think counterspells will be good. So we're pretty happy to see a slower start from our opponents. Although Duress could be effective against us. And then Lockdown doesn't seem needed right now. There's the green mana, opponent passes. So yeah, we've got shields up on 3 steps ahead. and then Union can gain life. Demolition Field can maybe blow up our black source, since we don't have a lot of swamps in the deck necessarily. Opponent's gonna Smuggler Surprise in the meantime, so it does look like a Reanimator deck, and they picked up a Vaultborn Tyrant. Okay, so we know what we're up against now. We'll have to watch out for more surprises at instant speed in the future, so it's gonna be tricky to tap out. But hopefully Apparatus can stick around for a while. Alright, so far so good. And then Augury Proliferate, so it's basically free. Yeah, I'll just pass for now. And then 3 steps ahead, we can also maybe copy the Apparatus. So end of turn Augury. Finding Robbery, we're pretty far from casting. Fable Passage enables Anoint, but at this point I think I just want another 3 steps ahead. And then if I cast this, it gets a 2 mana discount, so we can cast it for 6 total basically, which means I could both make a token of Mindsplice as well as draw this card. I think I still should keep it as a counterspell primarily. Get our black mana in play. But we might be able to get to a point where we Twilight presenting lethal and then protect with 3 steps ahead. Our opponent's going for Vaultborn, so we want to counter and then make a copy of Mindsplice. And then let's see, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I guess we can also draw. So the full value 3 steps ahead. And Mystical Teachings is going to be awesome. Discard a Backstreet. So we can cast a 1 mana Teachings and almost flash it back for just 1 mana. So I think we can probably close out the game in 2 turns here by getting a time stop with Mystical Teachings. Opponent tries to zombify Tyrant. Yeah, let's run it back. And then I'll copy the token as opposed to the one with 4 counters in case they can remove it somehow. That works. And then Anoint can go at this point. Alright, so probably fine to play another Apparatus. So we have a 7, 8, 9 mana discount. So I can easily make a lethal White Sun's Twilight and then Teachings for time stop. Alright, let's do one for 12. And then we can Teachings for time stop, either cast it in the opponent's upkeep or maybe wait for them to put a spell on the stack, so that also gets exiled. And then we should be able to win unless our opponent has multiple removal spells here. Alright, and that'll do it. Awesome. So we got to see our Esper Teachings deck in action, and the deck's incredibly satisfying to play, especially once you get your Mindsplice Apparatus going. Of course, it's not always going to be easy when facing some of the more aggressive decks in the format, so then we are relying pretty heavily on Temporary Lockdown, so occasionally you're just going to get run over by Mono-Red, and there's not much you can do about it, but the games where you actually get to play Magic, the deck seems incredibly strong, and has a lot of flexibility as well, with lots of one-offs you can maybe tutor up with your Mystical Teachings, so there's a lot of room for customization as well. But yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.